Hello, my dear friend. Welcome to the session of learning. Today, I will explain the procedure of environmental study and ways to monitor its implementation. It is very essential because when implementation part comes, then it had been studied that its implementation is very poor. That's why day by day our environment is degrading, and we have to save the environment and we have to make the climate better climate for the future generation to come. The procedure for conducting an environmental study and monitoring its implementation typically follows a structured process to ensure that environmental projects are undertaken with considerations for their environmental impact. It is very essential. So, below is the outline of the general steps for conducting an environmental study and ways to monitor its implementation. Number one is procedure for conducting an environmental study. What is the procedure? How to study it? This is very important tool for environmentalists to study the proper environmental impacts and to initiate it. Scoping. First of all, define the objectives and scope of the environmental study. What is the scope and what is your objective? It has to be predefined and predetermined also. Now, it is very essential to identify key stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders? And involve them in the scoping process. It is very essential to involve them in the scoping process and then determine the boundaries for the study. Up to what level a study should be made so that proper impacts on the surroundings can be studied, and then identify potential environmental impacts and concerns. Prior environmental impact identification is very essential to assess the actual environmental damage which will occur due to upcoming of a new project. Second is baseline data collection. To gather baseline data collection is very important tool, important steps to initiate the study. And for this, assess the various environmental components such as air quality, water quality, biodiversity, soil and socio-economic factors. And then identification of sensitive and valuable areas within the study area is also very crucial, because whenever a new project comes, then surroundings are more affected. So it is very essential to identify the sensitive and vulnerable areas which will be more affected due to these upcoming projects. Impact prediction and assessment. Prediction of potential impacts of proposed project on the environmental aspects is very important, and this should be based on the available data and scientific analysis. Assess the significance of these impacts, considering both positive and negative effects, and consideration of direct and indirect and cumulative impacts is also more important. Alternative analysis. Evaluation of various project alternatives to identify environmental preferable options is required, and then comparison of the potential impacts and benefits of each alternative gives the essential insights for a particular project. Mitigation measures. Now, development of mitigation measures to minimize or offset adverse impacts identified during the assessment is required. What mitigation measures should be adopted to minimize the adverse effect? It will give a sustainable development, and then prioritize measures to address the most significant impacts and ensure that mitigation measures are integrated into the project's design and planning, because when project will be established and start operating, then it is very difficult to implement the proper mitigation measures. So every mitigation measure should be integrated into the project design, and its proper planning and study is very essential. Environmental impact assessment requires EMP, Environmental Management Plan. That is, development of an environmental management plan that outlines the steps for implementing mitigation measures, monitoring and reporting is the essential tools to mitigate the impacts, because unless we make a plan for environmental management, mitigation is incomplete. Then specific responsibilities and timelines for the mitigation actions are required. Who is responsible? Who will be main accountable person, main accountable format for this project, and what should be the timelines so that the adverse impacts can be minimized. Then the most important thing comes public consultation and stakeholders engagement. Involvement of public and stakeholders in the decision making process is really a very understanding and measurable tools for understanding the proper damage of the environment and to implementing the proper mitigation measures. We should also share information about the project and the environmental implications to the concerned public, that is surroundings, who will be affected due to these upcoming projects. And the very essential tool that has been given in the environmental impact assessment is the public consultation or public hearing, which is done before grant of the environmental clearance. Then documentation and reporting. This compiles the results of the environmental study into comprehensive EIA report and presentation of findings, analysis and recommendation to the decision makers and public. Also gives insights of the particular project. Decision making. Decision makers review the EIA report and consider the environmental, social and economic factors when deciding whether to approve or modify the project. Suppose a particular project has more possibility of impacting the environment and surroundings, then it has to be modified. Again, the proper EMP has to be reviewed, and then project can be ordered. Implementation monitoring. Implement the project and ensuring the mitigation measures and the EMP are followed. And then monitoring of the project's activities to confirm compliance with the environmental regulations is also very important. This gives the complete insights of the project and also the tools to assess the environmental damage. Post implementation monitoring. This monitoring should be continued after the completion of the project, and this should ensure that the impacts are in line with the prediction and with acceptable limits, within the acceptable limits. Ways to monitor implementations. Regular site inspections. Now, regulators should conduct regular site visits to monitor compliance with mitigation measures and environmental management plan. Environmental monitoring programs. Regulators should establish for ongoing environmental monitoring, including air and water measurements and habitat assessments and more. Audits and assessments. Periodically audit project activities to verify the environmental standards are met, and this gives the proper evaluation techniques that is required for the project. Community feedback. Regulators should engage the local community and stakeholders to gather feedback in the project's environmental performances. Public reporting. Provide the regular projects reports on the project's environmental performance to the regulatory authorities, and they should assess periodically the development of the projects and should also assess whether the proper mitigation measures are being followed or not. Then this will give the proper ideas that how the project is coming up and what measures are implemented there to mitigate the environmental damage. This is very much required. And then after the projects is finished, it is completed, then again it is very essential to monitor its effect on the environment. And for this, regulators have given the tool that is consent to operate. And now in next session, I will deal with the consent to operate and how to monitor the projects which is already operating. Thank you very much.